"Can I borrow your wedding ring, Grandma?" He said it like he was asking for sugar. No pause, no wait. Just words tossed across my kitchen like they meant nothing at all. I was holding a dish towel, and for a second, I thought I misheard. But Jake was already sitting down, phone in hand, sipping my iced tea like he'd never broken a single promise in his 24 years of life. "I want to use it for the proposal," he added. "It's like symbolic, right? Grandpa's ring, you and him, long love, strong marriage, that whole thing." My fingers curled around the towel. It was damp from dishes, but it felt like ice now. "You want to use my ring?" I asked. "Just for the proposal," he smiled. "Cassie'll love the story. Old ring, family history, romance. You know." Jake always smiled like that when he wanted something. He had his father's dimples and his mother's charm. Dangerous combination. As a boy, he used that smile to get cookies before dinner or an extra hour on the Xbox. As a man, it bought him silence when he missed birthdays or forgot to call on Mother's Day. I walked to the drawer in the hallway cabinet. The ring was in a small velvet box, the kind Derek had picked out 49 years ago. He hadn't even proposed properly. He just handed it to me with his awkward grin and said, "You in?" And I was. God help me, I was all in. Through bills, sickness, layoffs, and late nights folding laundry until my hands ached. Through his cancer and the long, slow dying. I never took the ring off. Not once. Not until the day we buried him. That was 10 years ago. Since then, it had lived quietly in my drawer. I hadn't opened the box in years. Jake followed me. I knew he would. He always watched too closely when there was something he wanted. "You can trust me," he said, softer now. "I'll take good care of it." I looked at him, tall and handsome, still wearing his gym clothes, his keys dangling from that ridiculous carabiner. My grandson, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, the boy I taught to spell dinosaur, the boy I once bailed out when he crashed his dad's truck and didn't want his parents to find out. I opened the box. The ring was still there, gold, simple, a little scratched on the underside. Derek never liked flashy things. "You'll bring it back," I said, more like a statement than a question. Jake grinned, slipping the box from my hand like a man sealing a deal. "Of course, just for tonight. Tomorrow tops." And that was that. No thank you, no hug. Just a pat on the counter and "Love you, Grandma," tossed over his shoulder as he headed out the door. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty velvet box in my palm. The next day was Sunday. My son, Jake's father, invited me to dinner. Said it was casual, just a little something for family. I brought my famous apple cobbler, took the bus because my car's been making a funny sound and I didn't want to risk it. Walked the last 2 blocks to their big house with the manicured lawn and the doorbell that plays music. Cassie opened the door. She was all smiles and gloss, in a cream blouse that probably cost more than my monthly pension. "Hi, Mrs. Ellis." Come in, come in." She'd only called me Grandma once, the first Christmas. After that, it was always Mrs. Ellis, like I was a distant relative they tolerated. Inside, people were already gathered. Jake's cousins, his friends, a few neighbors. I recognized most of them, though none of them came to see me when Derek passed. There was music playing, laughter, a big pot of chili on the stove. The kind of night people post about later with captions like "blessed" or "family first." I was putting the cobbler on the counter when Cassie walked past me, her hand brushing my arm as she reached for a drink. That's when I saw it. On her finger. My ring. Derek's ring. She wasn't even trying to be discreet. She was waving her hand around like it was a prize. And everyone was cooing and fawning, "Oh, it's so vintage," and "Wow, it's so meaningful," and "Jake, you did so well." I couldn't move. My hands were still sticky with foil from the pie tin. My knees felt wrong. Jake caught my eye from across the room. For a split second, he looked sheepish. Then he smiled, big and proud, and mouthed, "Isn't it perfect?" Perfect. Not borrowed. Not just for the proposal. Not, "I'll bring it back tomorrow." Just perfect. I didn't eat a thing that night. Not a spoonful of chili, not a bite of my own cobbler. I just sat on the edge of their gray velvet couch, hands folded in my lap, and watched Cassie parade around with my wedding ring like she'd earned it. She held her wine glass in her left hand on purpose. I know she did. Held it up when she laughed, gestured with it when she talked. The ring caught the light just enough to glint. And every time someone noticed, she lit up like a Christmas tree. "Isn't it sweet?" she said for the third time. "Jake said it belonged to his grandma. Just so romantic." "His grandmother's name is Martha," said a woman I didn't know, maybe from Cassie's side. "Is that you?" I nodded. Yes, it was mine. Cassie didn't look at me. She just kept smiling. Someone clinked their glass and called for a toast. Jake stood up, cheeks pink, arm draped around Cassie's shoulders. "To love that lasts," he said, "like my grandparents had." There it was again, that sweet story, polished and packaged and sold to the crowd. And me? I was a prop, a museum piece dragged out for effect. No one asked me what I thought. No one asked if it was okay. After the toast, Jake finally made his way over. "You doing okay, Grandma?" I looked up at him. "You said you'd bring it back." He blinked. "Yeah, I know. But it looked so good on her. I figured, well, we figured, it made sense to keep it in the family, you know? It's tradition." "Tradition," I repeated. "To take without asking?" He laughed, a little awkwardly. "Come on, don't be like that. You said yes." "I didn't say yes to giving it away," I wanted to say. "I said yes to lending it. For a moment. For meaning. Not for show. Not forever." But I didn't speak. I just nodded and said, "Sure." Because that's what I do. What I've always done. Nod, smile, make nice. Don't embarrass the kids. Don't start trouble in front of guests. It was already dark when I stepped outside. I didn't say goodbye. No one noticed. My purse felt heavier than usual, even though I knew it wasn't. That's just what disappointment weighs. The bus didn't come for 20 minutes. I stood under the flickering street lamp, watching the bugs swarm around it like fools chasing light. Back home, I made tea, but forgot to drink it. I sat in Derek's chair. Not mine, the one by the kitchen window, but his. The deep one with the high back and the frayed armrest where his elbow used to rest. It still smelled faintly like his aftershave, even all these years later. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No ticking clock, no television. Just the hum of the fridge and the soft settling of walls that had seen everything. This house had held birthdays, holidays, sleepless nights with fevers, arguments over bills, Sunday dinners with too much gravy. And now it held just me. And a ghost of a ring, I looked at the small space on my dresser where the ring box used to sit. Empty, now. Just a square of faded wood and the imprint of velvet. Derek would have hated this. Not the missing ring. He never cared about things. But the lie. The disrespect. "You give something," he used to say. "You do it with open hands. But you don't take something. Not from your own people." I closed my eyes. We weren't fancy, Derek and I. We didn't have diamonds or cruise vacations. But we had dignity. We showed up. We paid our dues. We said thank you. We taught our son the same. or tried to. What had gone wrong? The next morning, I called my son. He didn't pick up the first time, or the second. On the third try, he answered with a distracted, "Hey, Ma, what's up?" "I wanted to ask about the ring," I said. Straightforward, calm. "The ring?" A pause. "Oh, Jake's engagement? Isn't it sweet? He said he was borrowing it." "Well, technically, yeah, but you gave it to him, right?" "No, I lent it." He sighed. "Come on, Ma, don't be difficult. He's happy. Cassie's over the moon. They love the symbolism, the whole grandparents' blessing angle. Don't ruin that." "Ruin it?" "You know what I mean." I did. I knew exactly what he meant. Don't speak up. Don't make a scene. Don't get in the way of their story. "I'd like it back," I said finally. There was silence on the line. "It's a bit late for that, don't you think?" And then he laughed. Light. Forced. "We can get you a replica if you're feeling sentimental." A replica. As if a thing that's held 49 years of a life could be replaced by something off a shelf. "I see," I said. "Don't take it personally, Ma. They're young. Let them have this." He was already pulling away from the conversation. I could hear the click of a keyboard. An email ping. His day, moving on. "Okay," I said softly. "Thanks for your time." And I hung up. The days after the dinner passed slowly. I didn't call. Neither did they. I spent most of my time in the garden, pulling weeds that didn't need pulling, rearranging stones along the path that had been crooked for years but never bothered me until now. I scrubbed the kitchen floor twice, washed the windows even though I knew the rain was coming. There's something about doing things with your hands when your heart's too loud. On Thursday, I went to the market. The cashier, a girl with pink braids and a lip ring, smiled and asked, "Doing anything fun this weekend?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. "No," I said, "just keeping busy." She scanned my bread, my apples, my half and half. I paid in cash. Derek always said debit cards were like invisible holes in your wallet. At home, I made soup. The kind Jake used to love when he had colds as a boy. I poured it into a plastic container, put it in the fridge, and then laughed at myself. He wouldn't eat it. He didn't even call to say thank you for the cobbler. That night I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 and sat in the living room in my robe. The house creaked like an old body. I suppose it was. It had a spine, bones, a beating heart, once. On the mantel, the photos watched me. Derek with his big, crooked smile. Our son in his graduation robe, not yet suspicious of my advice. Jake as a toddler, holding my hand at the zoo, eyes full of wonder. I used to think love like that would be enough. That raising them, feeding them, paying the school fees, saving for birthdays, buying Christmas on layaway, that all of that would buy me a permanent seat at the table. Turns out there are no permanent seats, just temporary chairs, and they'll pull yours away the moment it squeaks too loud. On Saturday, I got a visit. Not Jake, not my son. It was Annie, my niece. She's 32, works at the public library, drives an old sedan with more stickers than paint. She comes by sometimes, brings books, helps me with the leaky faucet. "Thought you might want company," she said, carrying in a bag with bananas and tea. We sat in the kitchen. I made us toast. "I saw the pictures," she said carefully. "Jake's engagement." "So it was online." "Of course it was. Everything is." "He used your ring," she added, watching me. I nodded. Annie didn't rush. She never did. She buttered her toast, poured the tea, and let the silence be what it was. "Do you want it back?" she finally asked. "I do," I said. And it wasn't just about the ring anymore. It was about what it stood for. Not the love, not even the marriage, but the memory of being asked, the dignity of consent, the feeling that your history mattered. I thought about going over there, I added, but I won't. Not yet. Annie nodded. If you want, I can say something. No, I said firmly. It has to be me. They have to hear it from the person they stopped seeing. That night, I took the old fireproof box from under my bed, the one with the house deed, the insurance policies, the savings account information. Derek and I always meant to update it, but never got around to it. I went through the files, the balance sheets, the utility bills, the medical receipts. And there, tucked in the back, was the document Jake signed when he was 22, the one where I co-signed for his college loan. He never paid me back, never even mentioned it after graduation. I shredded it. I made a new folder, labeled it Martha's Instructions. Inside, I put the number of a lawyer I hadn't spoken to in years. I wrote down Annie's name, her birthday, her address. And under it, in plain pen, only person who visits me without asking for something. On Sunday, Jake called. Hey, Grandma, he said brightly. You doing okay? I'm fine. There was a pause. He was nervous. So, Cassie's planning a little engagement brunch next weekend. She wants you to come. Says it'd mean a lot. Does she? He laughed. Well, I mean, it's mostly for her parents and friends, but yeah, of course you should be there. Will I get to see the ring again? I asked. He hesitated. Grandma, you said you'd bring it back. I didn't mean, look, Cassie really loves it. It's like part of the story now. Everyone thinks it's hers. Taking it back would be weird. Weird? I repeated. Yeah, I mean, what are we going to do? Give it back and say it was just a loan? Yes, I said. Silence. Grandma, come on. It's just a ring. No, I said gently. It was a promise. I didn't go to the engagement brunch. I wrote a card. Plain, cream-colored. The kind you buy in bulk at the pharmacy because they don't scream or sparkle. Inside, I wrote, wishing you the kind of love that doesn't need to borrow history to feel real. Martha. I didn't sign it Grandma. That word had started to feel like a coat someone else kept putting on me, one with holes in the pockets. I left the card on my hallway table. Still sealed. Still unsent. I wasn't sure who I'd be sending it to anyway. Jake, who took without asking, or Cassie, who wore without knowing or caring. Instead, I spent the morning baking cornbread. Real Southern style. Coarse meal, buttermilk, cast iron skillet. Derek used to say mine was the only kind worth eating. I hadn't made it in years. The pan was heavier than I remembered. At noon, I sat on the porch with a slice and a glass of iced tea. The neighbor's kid was trying to ride his bike with no hands, wobbling dangerously down the sidewalk. I watched him fall, get back up, and fall again. No one ran to help. He didn't cry, just dusted off and tried again. I admired that stubbornness. Around 3, the phone rang. I didn't answer it. I let the machine pick up. It was my son's voice. Ma, listen. I just heard from Jake. You're not coming? Look, I don't know what this is about, but can we not do this now? Just let the boy be happy. He paused. They're young. They don't mean anything by it. It's just a ring. A click. Silence. No apology. No understanding. Just that same tired plea. Don't make waves. But what he didn't know, what they all didn't know, was that the water had already risen. I was already drenched. That evening, I opened the top drawer in the bedroom. pulled out Derek's old leather notebook, the one he used to keep track of bills, passwords, reminders written in his blocky handwriting. Between the pages, I found an old photo of us, black and white, a little torn at the edge. Me in a borrowed dress, him in a suit 2 sizes too big. We were laughing at something just outside the frame. I don't even remember what, but I remember the feeling of being chosen, not as a formality, not because it looked good, but because it was me. Derek wasn't perfect. God knows we had our moments, the silent weeks, the slammed doors, the times we only spoke through to-do lists. But he never made me question my place beside him, not once. And now, here I was, watching my place in the world shrink to an afterthought. The next morning, I called Annie. "Would you mind taking me into town?" I asked. "There's a few things I need to take care of." "Of course," she said, without asking why. We drove in silence. Her little car rattled on the bumps, and the radio played some folk singer I didn't know. The sun came in strong through the window, making the dust on the dashboard glow like gold. First, we stopped at the florist. Not the big chain store, but the little one next to the barber shop. I bought 2 lilies, Derek's favorite. Told Annie I'd walk alone from there. She didn't argue. The cemetery was quiet, as usual. Just the wind and the sound of a bird somewhere up in the oak trees. I cleaned the headstone with my sleeve. Left 1 lily resting against the granite. The other I held in my lap as I sat on the bench nearby. "I'm doing it, Derek," I said softly. "Took me long enough. But I'm not going to let them turn me invisible." I sat there a while. Let the wind talk. Let the sun shift. When I stood up, I felt lighter. Not younger. Just more real. On the way back, we stopped at the lawyer's office. He was old now. Older than I remembered. Hair gone, voice thinner, but the eyes were still sharp. "Martha Ellis," he said, peering over his glasses. "It's been a while." "I'd like to update some things," I said. "Make a few adjustments to the will, and set up a trust." He didn't ask why, just nodded and got to work. "Do you want to specify conditions?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I want my assets protected. No early access. No claims from family, unless explicitly approved." "And the beneficiary?" "Annie," I said without hesitation. "She's the only one who still knocks before she comes in." Annie looked up from the corner, startled. "I'm serious," I told her. "It's not about money. It's about respect. And you've shown me more of that than anyone in a long time." I expected her to protest, but she didn't. She just blinked fast and nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. We signed papers. The lawyer stamped things. I initialed in all the boxes. By the time we walked out, the light had changed. Evening was coming on, and the sky was starting to blush. I had done something real. Quiet, but irreversible. Something that couldn't be borrowed. On Monday morning, I didn't turn on the radio. I let the silence settle like a blanket over the house. The kind of silence that doesn't suffocate, just listens. I made toast and tea. No rush. No plan. By 10, the phone started again. Jake first. No message. Then my son. "Mom, we need to talk. Please call back." Then Cassie. "Hi, Mrs. Ellis, just checking in, hoping everything's okay." They were circling now, not with apologies, with unease. Like they felt something shift, but couldn't name it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Not yet. I spent the day going through the attic, sorting, touching, remembering. I found Derek's fishing hat, still with a feather tucked into the band. A postcard Jake had sent from camp when he was 9. The last time he wrote me something with his own hands. Dear Grandma, I miss your grilled cheese. Dad says I can't have soda. I wish you were here. I almost laughed. And then I didn't. By late afternoon, I brought down a box labeled Keepsakes. Inside were a few letters, Derek's watch, and a velvet pouch I didn't recognize at first. When I opened it, I found my own mother's brooch. Silver, delicate, the clasp still stiff with age. I hadn't seen it in decades. She'd given it to me when I turned 25. Said, "This isn't worth much in money, but it was my mother's. Keep it or don't. Just don't give it to someone who thinks it's just an accessory." I placed it on the dresser, right beside the empty ring box. No, not empty. Not anymore. Just finished. The next day, I got a knock at the door. Not a call, not a text. A knock. It was Cassie. She wore a soft pink sweater, perfectly ironed jeans, and a look she must have practiced in the mirror. Polite concern, not guilt. "Hi, Mrs. Ellis," she said. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't invite her in. I stepped onto the porch and shut the door behind me. She glanced over my shoulder as if expecting the rest of the house to answer too. "I wanted to see if everything's okay," she began. "You didn't come to the brunch. Jake was worried." I said nothing. Let her speak. She smiled, tentative. "He told me about the ring, that you seemed upset." I was. "I'm sorry if it felt like we were taking something that wasn't ours. It's just, it meant a lot to me. The story of it. The symbolism." "The story," I repeated. "But not the source?" Cassie blinked. "Sorry? You liked what it represented, but didn't ask who gave it or why. You wore it before I'd even left the room." She bit her lip, eyes flicking downward. "Jake said it was fine. It wasn't his to promise." Cassie hesitated. "I see that now." Her voice was quiet. Maybe genuine. Maybe not. "I've worn it every day since," she added. "It's become part of, well, everything. People ask and I tell them it was yours. That you and Derek were married nearly 50 years. But you don't mention how it got to you." She looked up, surprised. "No," she admitted. "I didn't give it to you," I said. "It was taken." The words landed between us like a stone. She swallowed. "I understand. And if you want it back—" "I don't," I interrupted. She blinked. "You can keep it," I said. "But understand what you're keeping. It isn't just gold. It's memory. It's history. It's the cost of all the times I said nothing." Cassie's eyes filled slightly. "I didn't mean for it to be like that." "No one does," I said, turning toward the door. "But it's always like that when people forget to ask." Before she could respond, I stepped inside and closed the door. Not hard, not loud, just final. That evening, I called the jeweler, a small shop downtown, run by a woman named Hildy, who'd once restrung Derek's watch band without charging me because it looked like it had seen a war. "Mrs. Ellis?" she said. "Haven't heard your voice in a while." "I'm looking to commission a piece," I said. "Something new?" "For yourself?" "For myself." There was a pause, then warmth in her voice. "Come by tomorrow. We'll design something together." I slept well that night. Not because everything was fixed, not because I'd said all I needed to say, but because I'd said something. And sometimes, that's where dignity begins. Not in being heard, but in choosing not to stay silent. Jake showed up 2 days later. No warning, just the rumble of his car pulling into my driveway like nothing had changed. I was watering the azaleas. He stood by the fence, one hand on the gate, the other running through his hair. That gesture. He used to do it when he forgot his homework or when he knew he was in trouble, like the problem could be combed away. "Grandma," he said, "can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I clipped a brown leaf from the bush, let it fall to the ground. "I figured I owed you an explanation," he went on, "about the ring." "Is that what you came to offer?" I asked, not looking at him. "An explanation?" Jake sighed and opened the gate. He was taller than I remembered. "Isn't that funny? You raise them, you hold their hands across the street, you pull them from monkey bars when they scrape their knees. And one day, they come towering back like strangers in your own garden." "I didn't mean to upset you," he said. "I thought it was okay." "You thought taking something that wasn't yours was okay?" He frowned. "You said I could use it." "Borrow it," I corrected. "You said, 'Can I borrow your wedding ring?' And I said yes, trusting you'd know what that meant." Jake shifted his weight. "I didn't think it would matter this much. I mean, it's just a ring." Those words again, like a refrain in a song I never wanted to hear. I looked at him then. Really looked. "This ring," I said, "saw your grandfather's hands before they shook. It sat on his finger through layoffs and Sunday mornings, through cancer and silence and love that didn't need an audience. It touched 1,000 handshakes, peeled 100 oranges for your lunch, and held mine every night until the very last one. It is not just a ring." Jake swallowed hard. "I didn't know you felt that way." "You didn't ask." Silence stretched between us, thick, uneven. He tried again. "Cassie loves it. Everyone says it's perfect, that it looks like it was made for her." "It wasn't," I said. "It was made for me." "I get that," he said. "But she's part of the family now. Isn't this what families do? Pass things down?" "Passing down," I said quietly, "requires handing over, not taking." Jake's shoulders dropped. "So, what now?" he asked. "Do you want me to give it back?" "No," I said. "I want you to understand what it cost." We sat on the porch steps after that, not saying much. The breeze picked up a little, rustling the tall grass at the edge of the yard. Jake stared at the ground. "I guess I've been pretty lousy at showing up." "You think?" He gave a weak laugh. "Yeah, I don't know. I got busy. Life moves fast." "It does?" I said. "But that's not an excuse for forgetting who holds your history." He glanced at me. "You're angry." "No," I said. "Not anymore. Anger's a storm. This is something else. Something quieter." "Like what?" "Like when you close a book," I said. "Not because the story's over, but because you finally realize you're not in it anymore." He didn't have a response for that. So we sat. Later, as he was leaving, he turned back. "I know it won't fix anything," he said, "but I'll get Cassie another ring. One of her own. I'll return yours, if that's what you want." "It's not about fixing," I said. "It's about remembering. And it's about knowing the difference between legacy and theft." Jake nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long while, I believed he heard me. That night, I opened the small box from the jeweler. Inside was a ring. New, modest, silver with a small sapphire. Not expensive, but lovely. It felt right on my finger. Light, but solid. Not a replacement, not a replica. A reminder that I still had chapters left. The next morning, I called Mr. Levin, the attorney Derek and I had used for years. He was retired now, but his son, Daniel, had taken over the practice. "Mrs. Ellis," he said warmly when he picked up, "it's good to hear from you. Everything all right?" "I'd like to come in," I replied, "to make changes. I've delayed it too long." "Of course." You want to update your will? Yes, and I'd like to establish a trust. He didn't ask for whom. He didn't ask why. Just gave me a time and said, "We'll make it easy." Annie drove me to the appointment. No questions, no chatter. Just her hand briefly on my arm as we waited at a red light. Daniel Levin looked like his father. Same calm eyes, same careful words. But where Mr. Levin always wore suspenders, Daniel had a pressed gray suit and a watch that probably cost more than my fridge. Still, there was something honest in the way he looked at me. We sat in the same office where Derek and I had once signed our first deed, our hands shaking from the weight of the mortgage. I remembered how Derek squeezed my fingers after, whispered, "We did it, Mar." Like owning something meant we were real adults now. Now, here I was again. Alone this time, but clear-eyed. "I want to leave my estate to my niece, Annie Price," I said. "Not my son. Not my grandson." Daniel didn't flinch. "May I ask why?" "I don't mind telling you," I said. "But I don't need your approval." He nodded, professional. "Understood." We spent the next hour going through paperwork. He explained the options: revocable versus irrevocable trusts, living wills, medical directives. He offered to make everything airtight. I initialed, I signed, I dated. When it was done, he gathered the papers into a folder and said, "If you change your mind, the documents are easy to revise." "I won't change my mind," I said. On the way out, Annie held the door open for me. She'd been quiet through the whole thing. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said. "You?" She gave a half smile. "Just surprised, I guess. I didn't expect you to do this." "For me?" "You're the only one who sees me as more than a fixture," I said. Annie didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "You've always been more than that, Aunt Mar." Her voice cracked just a little, and I looked away, embarrassed by the weight of emotion in the air. "You know," I said, "when Jake was little, he used to call me his favorite person in the world." Annie looked at me. "You still are, you know, to someone." That was all she said. That was all she needed to say. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old sewing machine. The thing barely ran anymore. Derek used to say I only kept it out of guilt. "Let it die with dignity, Mar," he'd joke. But I oiled the parts, replaced the thread, and stitched together a simple velvet pouch. Deep green, soft to the touch, for the sapphire ring. Something I made. Something mine. I put it in the pouch, tied it with a ribbon, and placed it on my nightstand. No one else would wear this one without asking. The phone rang after dinner. I didn't answer. Then the doorbell rang. I sighed. It was my son. I opened the door slowly. "Mom?" he said. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. Let him in. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. He stood in the kitchen, shifting on his feet like a schoolboy caught cheating. Jake told me," he started, "about your conversation, about the ring." "Mm-hmm. And about the will." So. He knew. "Cassie's uncle works in legal records," he said. "He saw your filing." I raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting coincidence." "Mom." He paused, then sighed. "Why Annie?" "Because Annie remembers who I am," I said. "Not what I used to give." His face tightened. "This isn't about money. It's about family." "No," I said. "It's about responsibility. About how you taught your son. It's okay to take things without respect. About how you only call when you need something. About how you stood by while your mother was erased from her own story." His shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean for it to be like that." But it was. Silence. Then, Jake's young, and you're not. He looked down. I don't know how to fix this. You can't, I said. You can only stop making it worse. He nodded. Will you at least reconsider the trust? He asked. No. He didn't argue. He just looked older than I'd ever seen him. Smaller, somehow. I'll walk you out, I said quietly. We reached the porch. The air was cool now, the sun gone behind the trees. As he stepped off the last stair, he turned back. Mom, I'm sorry. I know, I said. But that's not the same as changing. I didn't hear from Jake for almost a week. Not a call, not a message, nothing. Cassie posted photos online. Her hand delicately placed over his, the ring gleaming under a champagne flute. The caption read, "Forever started with family history." I stared at the photo for a long time, not at the ring, not even at Jake, but at her smile. There was something rehearsed about it, something sharp underneath the sweetness. Like a girl who'd just secured her place and didn't plan on letting it go. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. But I didn't look away either. On Sunday, Annie came over with blueberry muffins and a small envelope. I stopped by the bank, she said. Got the documents Daniel mentioned. She sat at the kitchen table while I brewed tea. You don't have to do this, she added. The trust, I mean. It's a lot. I want to, I said. She nodded slowly. Okay, then I'm honored. But I need you to know something. I waited. I'm not going to use it. Not unless I have no choice. It's yours. As long as you're here, it's yours. That's the thing about Annie. She says things not for praise, but for clarity. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. That's why you're getting it, I said. She smiled. Still want a muffin? Only if it's the ugly one with the top that collapsed. We laughed. The real kind. The kind that doesn't need to be explained. That night, I heard scratching under the back steps. I thought it might be a raccoon, but when I looked outside, there was nothing there. Just quiet. Still, I set out a small bowl of food, just in case. Derek used to say, kindness doesn't need a name. The next morning, the bowl was empty. Some things, I suppose, still find their way home. By Wednesday, I'd made a decision. I called the local consignment shop. Not the trendy one, but the older place by the church. Asked if they accepted vintage dresses and costume jewelry. Yes, ma'am, the girl said. We'd be happy to take a look. I packed a box. 3 dresses I hadn't worn since the 80s. A clutch purse with a pearl clasp. A necklace I never liked but kept because Derek once said it made me look fancy. A scarf Cassie gave me that still had the tag on it. And in a separate velvet pouch, not the new one, but another I'd sewn long ago, I placed Derek's cufflinks, not gold, not even valuable, just his, just worn. I wasn't giving them away, not really, just releasing them. I wasn't the keeper of a museum anymore. I didn't need to curate the past for people who didn't care to visit. That afternoon, I sat in the living room, the box beside me, when the doorbell rang. It was Jake. He looked tired, older than 24, his shirt untucked, a crease between his eyebrows. I've been thinking, he said, about everything. I waited. I talked to Cassie, told her the ring wasn't hers to keep, that I need to return it. I blinked. She cried, he admitted, said I was choosing you over her. Maybe I am. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. My ring. Wrapped in tissue, placed carefully, like something fragile for the first time. I didn't reach for it. I'm not here to make things go back, he said. I just I realized I can't build a life on something that wasn't given in truth. I looked at him. This boy I'd loved from the moment he was born, this man I no longer recognized, this stranger trying to come home. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said, "but I wanted to return it. The right way." He placed the tissue bundle on the table. Not forced. Not rushed. "I know you made a trust," he added. "I know I'm not in it." "That's correct. I understand." We stood there a moment, quiet. Then I asked, "And what will you give her now?" Jake smiled faintly. "Something new. Something we choose. Together. That's a better start." He nodded, then turned to leave. Halfway down the steps, he paused. "Do you want to keep it?" he asked. "The ring?" "Yeah. Or maybe you want to do something else with it." I didn't answer. Not yet. I watched him walk to his car, open the door, hesitate, then drive away. The box was still on my table. So was the ring. This time, I didn't put it back in the drawer. I placed the ring on the kitchen table and left it there for 3 days. It sat between my mail pile and the sugar bowl like a guest who wasn't sure whether to stay or leave. I didn't touch it. Didn't open the tissue again. Just let it be what it was. A returned object. A changed weight. On the 4th morning, I wrapped it properly. Not in a jewelry box, not in velvet, but in a soft cloth napkin I'd used for years at quiet Sunday breakfasts with Derek. I tied it gently with string and placed it in a drawer under my winter scarves. I didn't hide it. I just no longer needed to see it. That weekend, Annie brought over her little niece, her sister's girl, Lucy. 5 years old, shy, with 2 long braids and an obsession with bees. She wanted to meet Aunt Martha, who reads stories better than the library lady, Annie explained, laughing. Lucy climbed up onto my couch like it was a throne. She handed me a book, The Very Quiet Cricket. I read it aloud, giving each insect its own silly voice, and when I finished, Lucy clapped her hands and said, "You should be on the radio." I missed my chance, I smiled. She pointed to a photo on the mantel. "Who's that?" "That's my husband," I said. "Mr. Ellis." "Was he nice?" I paused. "He was, mostly. He was kind." "That's better than nice," she said, serious as a judge. I looked at Annie over the girl's head. She shrugged, amused. "Is he gone?" Lucy asked. "Yes, honey, a long time ago." Lucy nodded, accepting that without question. "Then you're the queen of the house now?" I blinked. "I suppose I am." She grinned, proud of herself. "Queen Martha. That's cool." For the first time in months, I laughed from somewhere deep. That night, after they left, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself properly. 74 years old. Gray hair cropped short now. Crow's feet deeper than they used to be. Skin thinner but still mine. I didn't feel old. I felt full. There is a difference. I pulled out my new sapphire ring and slipped it on. Not to replace what was lost, but to mark what I'd reclaimed. I didn't wear it on my left hand. I wore it on my right. My hand. My story. On Tuesday, I made a decision. I took the small file folder marked Derek, personal, and added a letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. Not a will, not instructions. Just thoughts. Things I wished I'd said before he died. Things I was proud of. Things I forgave him for. Things I was finally forgiving myself for. I sealed it in an envelope. On the front, I wrote, "For Martha, when needed." It wasn't about leaving something behind. It was about being heard, even if only by myself. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks over to see June. June is 78. cranky as a wet cat, and the best baker in the neighborhood. We used to talk often, back when our husbands were still alive. Then life got in the way. Grief does that, makes people disappear behind curtains of their own pain. I knocked, pie in hand. Blueberry. She opened the door in her slippers. "Well, well," she said. "Look what the wind dragged in." I smiled. "I brought dessert." She sniffed. "Homemade?" "Of course." "Then get in here before I fall over." We sat in her kitchen, the same one with the peeling wallpaper, and that radio always tuned to old country music. I cut slices, poured tea, and for the first time in a long while, we just talked. About everything. And nothing. "I heard about Jake's engagement," June said eventually. "You hear everything," I replied. "I hear what matters." She paused. "You all right?" "I am." "Good. You deserve to be." She tapped her teacup thoughtfully. "My grandson tried to get me to move in with them last year, said I shouldn't live alone. I told him I've been alone since his grandfather passed, and I've made fewer messes that way." I laughed. "Sounds about right." "Don't let them tell you who you are," she added. "Especially not the ones who only remember you when they want something." I nodded. That lesson took me longer than it should have. June raised her cup in salute. "Still counts if you learn it at all." When I came home, there was a letter in the mailbox, a real one, handwritten, from Cassie. The envelope was plain, no return address, just my name in careful cursive. Inside were 2 pages. "Dear Mrs. Ellis, I wanted to write, even if it's not enough. I understand now that the ring wasn't just an heirloom, it was your life. And I wore it like decoration. Jake gave it back. I didn't ask him to. I told him he didn't have to. But he said he wanted to do what was right, not just what looked good. That was the first time I saw something different in him. Maybe something from you. I hope someday you'll let me know more about you. Not the stories Jake tells, but the ones only you know. Until then, thank you for reminding me that legacy isn't owed. It's earned. Cassie." I folded the letter slowly, placed it in the same drawer with the ring. Not forgiveness, but maybe something closer to truth. On Friday morning, I opened the front door to sweep the steps and found a bag hanging from the knob. No note, just a plain brown paper bag, tied at the top with twine. Inside was a jar of homemade jam, strawberry, and a folded napkin embroidered with the words, "Just because you're quiet doesn't mean you're invisible." I knew immediately who sent it. June. I didn't call to thank her. I didn't knock on her door. I just placed a jar of pickled green beans on her porch the next morning with a note that said, "Loud isn't always strong, either." We'd started a new kind of conversation, one women like us have been having for centuries, without noise, without permission, without apology. That afternoon, I sat with Annie in the sunroom. We were going through old photo albums, the thick, cracked ones with black pages and tape corners that barely stuck anymore. "There," I said, pointing. "That's me and Derek at the state fair. He won me that bear." Annie squinted. "The one you kept in the closet?" "The very one. Why'd you never give it to Jake?" I took a sip of my tea. Because Jake never asked where it came from. He just wanted it for his shelf. Annie didn't speak, just turned the page. There was a photo of me in a hospital bed, hair messy, holding my newborn son. Derek beside me, holding a sandwich, looking like he'd just run a marathon. "Do you miss him?" Annie asked gently. "I miss who he was in the beginning," I said, "and who I was with him." "Not the end?" "No," I said. The end was full of silence and tubes and things I couldn't fix. But the beginning? That was ours. And it was good. Annie nodded, as if she understood more than her years should allow. That evening, I sat on the porch with a notebook, not a diary. I've never liked the word. Too soft, too secretive. Just a lined pad of paper and a pen that didn't skip. I wrote the names of all the women I'd known who'd been made quiet. My mother, my sister-in-law Margaret, my friend Helen from church, who raised 4 kids and died with less than 2 people at her funeral. And I wrote this: we gave so much without receipts. We made meals and memories and months of holding our breath, and no one thought to say, "Thank you for staying." But we stayed anyway. On Saturday, I visited the consignment shop again. The girl behind the counter smiled when she saw me. "We sold your blue dress," she said. "The one with the tiny roses." Did she look happy? "She looked powerful," the girl said. Said it made her feel like her grandmother. The good kind, the scary kind, the kind who runs things. I chuckled. That's the right kind. She handed me a small envelope with cash. I took it, placed it in my wallet behind the emergency 20 I always kept, and told her to keep the rest as a donation. "You sure?" she asked. "I am." That night, I walked to the edge of the yard where the moonlight hit the old fence. Derek had painted it once, years ago, sloppily, whistling while he worked. I ran my hand along the top rail. "Do you see me now?" I whispered. "Not just the girl who folded your socks or the woman who held your secrets, but me." The wind didn't answer, but the leaves rustled like they understood. The next morning, I got a call from my son. "Mom," he said, voice stiff, "I heard you had Jake return the ring." I didn't ask. He chose to. A pause. "I just don't get why all this had to turn into something bigger." "It was always something bigger," I said. "You just didn't see it." He sighed. "I'm not the enemy." "I know," I said. "But you were never on my side, either." Silence. Then, "Can we at least talk, in person?" "If you come without asking me for anything," I said. "Yes." He agreed. I didn't expect much, but I left a clean mug on the counter just in case. That afternoon, I got a card in the mail. No name on the outside. Inside, a typed message. "You reminded me that being quiet isn't the same as being small. Thank you for that." There was no signature, but the handwriting on the address looked familiar. Cassie. I placed the card next to the letter she'd written, not as proof, but as evidence that maybe the story wasn't over, not for them, and not for me. He showed up the next day just after lunch. My son. He stood on the porch in a blue button-down and slacks, like he was coming from a meeting or heading to one. He carried nothing. Not flowers, not food, not even that nervous energy Jake always had. Just himself. That, in itself, was unusual. I opened the door and stepped aside. He hesitated. "You sure?" "You're not here to ask for anything," I said. "So yes." We sat in the kitchen. I poured him tea the same way I used to when he came over after his divorce. Bitter, quiet, ashamed. Back then, he'd needed refuge, and I'd given it without questions. Now he needed something else, and I wasn't sure if I could offer it. He looked around the room like he hadn't seen it before. Noticed the new plant on the windowsill, the different cushion on Derek's chair. "You've made changes." "Time does that." He nodded slowly, stirred his tea, though he hadn't added sugar. "I want to say something," he began, "and I don't want to argue. I just want it said." I nodded. "Then say it." I didn't protect you, he said, looking down. Not when Jake asked for the ring. Not when you called afterward. Not for a long time, really. That surprised me. Not the truth of it. I'd known that for years, but the sound of him saying it aloud. I think I was always trying to be neutral, he added, to keep peace between generations, between egos. You weren't neutral, I said gently. You were absent. He looked at me. I didn't know how to be close to you once Dad died. You were so composed. Composed isn't the same as okay. I know that now. We sat quietly. Then I said, I raised you to be better than this. And somewhere along the way, you stopped listening. He nodded. I know. I gave you space. You took silence. I gave you love. You took ease. I know, he repeated. I studied his face. Still handsome in that tired way men get in middle age. Lines around the eyes, less hair, less noise. Jake's trying, he said. He's not perfect, but he's trying. Trying isn't enough, I said, but it's a start. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Not dramatic, just slow and careful. I brought this. It's not money or a plea, just a letter. From me to you. He placed it on the table. I didn't touch it. I don't expect anything, he said, but I wanted you to have it. Then before I could answer, he stood. I should go. I told myself I'd only come if I could keep my promise. No asking, just presence. He moved to the door, paused, turned back. You were always the one holding us together, he said. We just didn't see it until you stopped. And then he left. I didn't open the letter for 2 days. When I did, I found 5 paragraphs. No excuses, just memories. Of me braiding his hair after a fever. Of me sitting in the bleachers during every little league game, even the rainy ones. Of me teaching him to make Derek's favorite stew. I used to think you were made of stone, he wrote. Now I know it was steel. At the bottom, just 3 words. I see you. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with Cassie's. Not because it changed everything, but because it changed something. That week, I called the library and asked Annie to find me a book on late blooming gardens. She laughed. Planning to plant something? I think I already did, I said. I just want to know what to expect when it starts coming up. Jake showed up alone. No Cassie. No car running in the driveway. No excuses. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The air smelled like late summer. Cut grass, warm pavement, the tail end of something green. He knocked once. Not hard, not hesitant. When I opened the door, he was standing there in jeans and a plain t-shirt, holding nothing in his hands. His eyes met mine without flinching. Hi, he said. Can we talk? I stepped aside, nodded toward the porch chairs. We didn't need a kitchen table between us this time. We needed open air and something quiet underfoot. He sat first, then waited. I returned the ring, he began. I know you know that. I wanted to say it again, out loud. I said nothing. Let him fill the space himself. I also asked Cassie to take a break, he continued. Not because of you, because of me. I didn't like who I was with her lately, how I sounded, how I moved. That surprised me, not because I thought he was incapable of reflection, but because I hadn't expected him to turn the mirror on himself so soon. She's a good person, he added, but she wanted the idea of me, not the whole of me. And what's the whole of you? I asked softly. He looked down at his hands. A boy who took without asking, a man trying to fix that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. I started therapy, 3 weeks ago. That was unexpected. I raised an eyebrow. I wanted to know why I always assumed I could take, why I thought love was something I was owed, and why your silence felt like a betrayal instead of a boundary. He handed me the paper. It was a receipt from a local counseling center. Not proof, not performance, just a breadcrumb. "I'm not here to be re-added to any document," he said. "I'm here because I needed to look you in the eye and say, you mattered, more than I let on, more than I knew." I studied his face. He looked tired, but honest. "What do you want from me, Jake?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "I mean it. I just want to know if there's still a door open, not for inheritance, not for tradition, for relationship." I looked out across the yard. The fence Derek painted had started to peel again. A patch of hydrangeas bloomed purple near the edge of the shed. The world hadn't paused while we figured ourselves out. "Doors don't stay open forever," I said. "But windows do." He smiled a little. "That's something." We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "Tell me about the new ring." He blinked. "What? You said you'd start fresh with Cassie. What did you choose?" He reached for his phone, pulled up a photo, showed me a simple silver band with a small opal. "Why opal?" "She said it looked like moonlight," he said. "Said it reminded her of how quiet things can still glow." I nodded. "That's better than borrowing someone else's light." He didn't ask to come inside, and I didn't offer. But when he left, he turned back at the bottom of the steps and said, "I'm going to keep showing up, even if the window's small." I believed him. That was new. Later that night, I took the old ring, mine, the one Derek gave me, and placed it in a wooden box I hadn't used in years. Alongside it, I added his cufflinks, my mother's brooch, and the letter Jake had written. Not because I wanted to bury them, but because I wanted them kept. Not for someone else. Not for legacy. For truth. The next morning, I swept the porch and found a small rock tucked into the flower pot by the steps, painted yellow with a tiny red heart on it. On the back, in childlike scrawl, "You are seen." I smiled. Lucy. She must have dropped it during one of Annie's visits. I placed it on the windowsill in the kitchen, right next to the salt jar and the timer that hasn't worked since 2009. It belonged there. A small, deliberate reminder that not all things taken from us are lost forever. Some return in new forms. Some return better. Annie came by after work, hair pulled back, smelling of books and old wood polish. She dropped her keys into the bowl by the door like she lived here. In some ways, she did. Not in square footage, but in presence, in memory. "I made chicken salad," I said. "Real mayo, not that light stuff." She grinned. "Now you're just showing off." We ate on the porch, plates balanced on knees, legs tucked under. No fuss, no ceremony. "You've changed," she said after a while. "How so?" "You sit straighter now, but your voice is softer." I thought about that, about how people measure healing in volume, in tone, in posture. "I think I stopped waiting," I said. "For what?" "To be invited." Annie looked out over the lawn, chewing thoughtfully. "I think that's when we get our power back," she said. "When we stop auditioning." After she left, I pulled out the list I'd started weeks ago, the one I'd titled "Things No One Asked Me." I'd added to it in pieces. Short thoughts, moments remembered not for their noise, but their ache. Who helped you when Derek was in the hospital? Did you ever want to go back to school? What was your favorite part of motherhood before it turned into management? Did you ever imagine being asked to give so much and be thanked so little? And then, at the bottom, I added, "What did it feel like to finally say no?" I didn't answer. The question was the answer. 2 days later, I found a letter in the mailbox. Different handwriting this time. It was from Lucy, scrawled in green crayon on lined paper. "Dear Queen Martha, I made you a crown. It's made of dandelions, but I stepped on it. So I'm sending you this letter instead. You are the best story reader and you make my aunt smile. From Lucy, age 5 but almost 6. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I pinned the letter to the fridge with a chipped magnet that used to hold grocery lists. It's funny what becomes holy over time. A note, a rock, a single sentence spoken honestly. That weekend, I went to church for the first time in months, not because I needed saving, because I needed a bench. The kind where no one expects you to speak, but everyone sees you're there. I wore a gray dress and my new ring. The sapphire caught the light when I reached for the hymnal. The woman beside me, I didn't know her, leaned over and whispered, "That's a lovely ring." "Thank you," I said. "I bet it has a story." I smiled. "It does, but today it's just a ring." And that was enough. When I got home, there was a message on the machine, Jake's voice again. "Hey, Grandma, just checking in. No pressure, just thinking of you." He was learning. That night I sat on the edge of my bed and took out the wooden box, opened it slowly, ran my fingers over the brooch, the cufflinks, the ring. All the things I once believed proved my worth. I closed the lid, and for the first time, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt like I'd given something up, willingly. Because I was finally ready to carry only what was mine. The days began to fold into each other, gentle and even. No drama, no sharp turns. Just a rhythm I hadn't known I was allowed to want. In the mornings, I sat by the window with my tea and watched the same sparrow return to the feeder. He always landed crooked, like one wing was heavier than the other. But he stayed, and he ate. And that, I figured, was enough. One afternoon, I baked zucchini bread and wrapped 3 slices for June. Left them on her doorstep with a note that read, "Still standing." 2 days later, a jar of peach preserves appeared on mine. No note needed. That was the language now. Not phone calls. Not confrontation. Just presence. Quiet offerings. Annie called one evening from the library. "We're starting a memoir writing group," she said. "Mostly women over 60. I told them about you." I chuckled. "What did you tell them?" "That you have more stories than you let on." "I'm not much of a sharer," I said. "You don't have to share. Just come. Just listen." I hesitated, then said, "All right. Once?" She laughed. "That's how it starts." The group met in the back room of the library, the one with dusty curtains and chairs that squeaked. We sat in a circle, women with lined faces and steady voices. Some held notebooks, others brought old letters. One woman, Lena, read a poem she'd written after her third husband left. It was raw, unguarded, beautiful in a way that made the room still. When it was my turn, I didn't read. I just said, "Sometimes silence is the only thing we're handed, but even silence has shape if you press into it long enough." They nodded. No applause, no fuss, just a shared understanding that being seen is its own kind of story. Jake visited again the next week, alone, as before. He didn't come to prove anything. He came to rake the leaves, didn't ask, didn't warn. I heard the sound of the rake out the window and found him in the yard, sleeves rolled, cheeks red with work. When he finished, He knocked once on the back door. I handed him water. He drank it. We didn't talk much, but before he left, he said, "I started a new job, community outreach." I raised my eyebrows. "It's not fancy, but I get to help people. Listen to their stories. Some of them sound like yours." I nodded. "Then listen better than you used to." "I'm trying." I believed him again. That still surprised me. That night, I returned to the list. Things no one asked me. I added one more line. What changed when you finally believed you were allowed to take up space? Still, I didn't write the answer. Some things are better left blooming. A few days later, a package arrived. Wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Inside was a small journal, leather-bound with a note on the first page. For the words you didn't say out loud. Yet. Cassie. Just her name, nothing more. No request to be let back in, no apology laced with expectation. Just an offering. That mattered. I placed the journal on the nightstand. Not ready to write. Not yet. But it was there. And this time the story would be mine. Not borrowed. Not shared by accident. Not flattened into someone else's memory. Mine. In the late afternoon, I walked through the garden. The hydrangeas were turning brown at the edges. The air had that sharpness, like the year was tipping towards something quieter. I didn't mourn it. Seasons are allowed to change. So are women. So are stories. It was a Tuesday when I realized the house no longer felt too big. The rooms still echoed, yes, and the floorboards still creaked where Derek used to step. But it no longer felt like a place I was shrinking inside. It felt like a place I filled. Just by being here. Just by not leaving. That afternoon I made soup. Not because someone was coming over. Not because I needed to impress. Just because it was cold. And the act of stirring something warm reminded me that care doesn't have to be announced to be real. I set the table for one, lit a candle, a quiet ceremony for no one but myself. And I ate slowly. Later, I pulled down a box from the closet marked Winter Linens. Inside, tucked beneath an old flannel blanket, was a photo I hadn't seen in years. It was me, 25 maybe, holding Jake in one arm, groceries in the other. I looked tired, but solid. A woman who got things done without asking for applause. I smiled. She would have liked who I became. Not because I stayed the same, but because I finally stopped apologizing for not being who everyone wanted. Annie came by that weekend. She brought Lucy again, who ran straight to the kitchen and handed me a plastic crown made of pipe cleaners and buttons. "For the Queen," she said, "because you're the boss of your house." I placed it on my head, crooked. "Always have been," I said. Lucy grinned. "Good." Later, when they left, Annie hugged me tighter than usual. "People are starting to talk about your story," she said. "At the library, at the group. They're saying you're brave." "I'm not brave," I said. "I'm just done being quiet." She nodded. "Same thing, maybe." That night, I wrote the first page in the leather journal Cassie sent. Not a full story, just a paragraph. A beginning. This is what I know. It takes time to realize you're allowed to take your own side. It takes longer to believe that no one else needs to understand why you did. I closed the book. Not because I was finished, but because I'd finally started. On Sunday morning, I took a walk through the neighborhood. I passed June's house, her curtains open for once. She waved. I passed the little park where Jake once fell off his bike and cried like the world had ended. I passed the church, the consignment shop, the fence, all the places that once held parts of me. and I kept walking. Not because I was leaving them behind, but because I didn't need them to prove I existed anymore. If you're reading this and you've ever felt invisible, I want you to know you're not. You're not just what you gave. You're not just what they remember. You're not a leftover place in someone else's story. You are the story, and you don't owe anyone your softness, unless they've earned it. If this story found you at the right moment, if it reminded you of someone, or maybe of yourself, then share it. Tell another woman she's allowed to take up space, and leave a comment. I do read them. Quiet doesn't mean absent. Sometimes we just wait until we have something worth saying.